On this week's episode of the First Three podcast, we'll be looking at two series that are going big on animation, Demon Slayer and Heavenly Delusion. Both are doing a great job of breaking the bank on the animation, but only one has the real narrative chops to stand above the rest. Which one is it? You'll have to listen to find out. So let's kick this week off with a show that needs almost no introduction. Kimetsu no Yaiba, aka Demon Slayer, one of the biggest properties coming to us from Studio Ufotable, probably best known for their work on Fate Zero, as well as a long working relationship with the Tales series of video games. They're a fairly unique studio in that they don't take on a lot of projects, and they tend to retain a great deal of their staff from project to project, which is fairly uncommon in the industry. They haven't worked on a series other than Demon Slayer since 2019. It's been their bread and butter, and I mean, like, why not? It is just raking in the dough. The show is based on the manga of the same name by Koyoharu Gotoge, a somewhat mysterious author in that they use a pen name and their real identity remains unknown to this day. While this might seem fairly unbelievable in this day and age, in Japan, artists can retain a degree of anonymity if they so choose. A fairly famous example being the popular band Green, who produce million-seller hits like the karaoke staple Kiseki, all the while being completely unknown. The four members of that group, they met in dentistry school, it's believed, and they were worried that they wouldn't be able to actually work as dentists if everyone knew they were part of this band, and turns out they probably don't even need to be dentists. They're making a lot of money singing songs. So for the uninitiated, Demon Slayer is a pretty typical shonen series in that it features a young protagonist, Kamado Tanjiro, whose family is slaughtered by a demon save for his younger sister, Nezuko. And with nowhere left to go and a sister to protect, he decides that his only option is to become a demon slayer and avenge his family. The show is into its, third season officially now at this point. So Tanjiro has faced off against a number of kind of lesser demons, and we're starting to get along in the plot now where their enemies are getting a little bit stronger. Everything is powering up as we're heading towards kind of the final confrontation with the big bad Kibutsuji Muzan, who kind of rules over all of the demons and is a pretty menacing figure. And now we find ourselves in the Swordsmith Village arc. So in typical Demon Slayer fashion, we kick things off with a double episode to start this season off. These kind of extended runs here have been kind of commonplace for the series as it's been so hugely popular. Things like double episodes have been kind of the norm to start a season and to end a season. So we're kind of doing the same here. Episode kicks off with the demons side of things here. We're getting a little meeting between the 5 remaining upper demons. Number 5, Gyoko. Number 4, Han Tengu. Number 3, Akaza, who we saw in the Mugen Train arc. Number 2, Doma. And number 1, Kokushibo. So these guys all have kind of unique personalities, and they're chatting in the Infinity Castle? I'm not exactly sure what this thing is, but apparently people already are very excited about the Infinity Castle being shown off, and it looked really impressive. It's kind of this kind of shifting floors, shifting walls kind of place. It seemed like this existed in kind of this like infinite space. And it was a first chance for Ufotable to really like flex their creative muscle. So really impressive opening sequence here. And it just kind of like sets the stage for what the bad guys want to do in this arc. They know that Tanjiro is going to be going to the Swordsmith Village, or at least they have an inclination that they want to get something out of the Swordsmith Village, and so they're going to send a couple of the demons there, and they're just figuring out which one of them is going to actually, do the do. So Gyoko number 5 and Hantengu number 4 are chosen to head out to the Swordsmith Village, and they're gonna be our big bads for this arc at least, so we'll look forward to seeing them in a little while. Then we flip over to Tanjiro, who is recovering immediately following the Entertainment District arc, which was the last one that aired last year. So everything picks up right after the events of that. Tanjiro awakens out of a coma. He kind of does a little bit of a recovery session, which is, I think, the 3rd or 4th time where we've seen Tanjiro recovering from injuries, and so it's kind of like a homecoming, I guess, kind of feeling for him. It's a chance for the show to reset the playing field and remind us of all the different kind of tangents that our characters are heading off on. We get a fair amount of comedy in this section here. This is kind of like a running thread throughout Demon Slayer, is that like a lot of these like little side bits, these, you know, kind of like slice of life moments are really gag heavy or big reactions. So I don't know, it doesn't really work for me because like it kind of like undercuts any amount of seriousness that's like going on in the plot at the time, and not that there was really, you know, anything in this case. There, everyone's just happy that Tanjiro's doing okay, but it has a tendency to do this a lot in the show, just to undercut a moment with some kind of gag, and I don't know, doesn't really work for me. Oh, there is one little scene that isn't played up for laughs, and it's a flashback that Tanjiro has a vision of, I think, like a distant relative. I think it's someone who looks exactly like him, but in the past. And a guest is being entertained at like a little traditional, you know, house, I guess. And this guest that's talking to Tanjiro's relative looks a lot like number 1 demon Kokushibo. So I'm not sure what that's all about. Not really anything they really talk about. It's about protecting people and, you know, just being, you know, good people and stuff. Nothing really too major, but you know, Tanjiro has this little vision and he's trying to figure out what it's all about. So Tanjiro gets to the Swordsmith's village. He chats with the village chief, who tells Tanjiro that they're looking for Haganezuka at the moment, but he's kind of wandered off for a bit, so Tanjiro's gonna have to wait to get his new sword forged by his specific swordsmith. And while he's waiting around, he meets Kanroji Mitsuri, who is one of the Hashira, one of the like higher level demon slayers out there, and she is voiced by Hanazawa Kana, one of the absolute legends of the industry. She's been around forever, and she voices like a million things, and she's really popular. So it's a good little role for her. She brings a lot of, you know, bubbly energy to the character, so that's pretty cool. We don't really see too much of Mitsuri in the opening couple episodes here. She says hi to Tanjiro, they have a meal together, and they kind of chat about things, and then she kind of like takes off. So hopefully she comes back. She's kind of cool. And this episode ends with Tanjiro running into the other Hashira that's going to be part of this arc, Tokito Muichiro, who is harassing some kid, wants a key from him or something. And we don't really get too much, but of course, Tanjiro, being the good little boy that he is, has to, you know, get in the way here and stop the bullying. So he surveys the scene a little bit, and beside the kid and Muichiro, there's a long-haired samurai-looking guy who looks really similar to the guy that Tanjiro saw in his little flashback. So that's kind of like the stinger that closes the episode out. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the way that Demon Slayer's production works is that the series is directed by Sotozaki Haruo, who has been in charge of Demon Slayer's entire run, and has been around the industry in various key animation and animation director positions before settling in over at Ufotable. But overall, what you find is that the scripts are written by a number of different people on the team. There's also a number of episode directors specifically who are script writers as well as episode directors. You've got your key animation guy who jumps in as well and does some directing. So it's really this collective effort where a lot of people are wearing a lot of different hats, at least at the top levels of the way that this place works, which is pretty interesting. So while the series might be like Sotozaki's vision of Demon Slayer, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this one, so you get a lot of different little influences here depending on who's running the ship for a given episode. So that's one thing to notice in this series, is that you can get some kind of interesting little quirks from episode to episode as they're possibly written and directed by completely different people. So episode 2 kicks off. Tanjiro jumps in, stops Muichiro from bullying this poor kid whose name is Kotetsu. And Muichiro is this really detached, robotic kind of kid. And he's kind of interesting because, like, you think he's being a jerk, but then you're not sure if he's maybe just kind of, like, spaced out, and that's just kind of, like, how he is. So, I like his design. Nothing too flashy, but he's accented with teal, which is a pretty sweet color. And if you're gonna give me a character that's a bit of a trope, then the kind of like expressionless character is one that I can definitely get behind. So Kotetsu ends up giving Muichiro the key that Muichiro was looking for, and it turns out that that key is for this mechanical doll. The samurai figure that Tanjiro thought that he saw was actually a human-sized mechanical doll built for kind of training, sparring, I guess. It apparently was crafted centuries ago, and Kotetsu is the remaining swordsmith of the family, and so he's been tasked with preserving the doll. So Muichiro fires the doll up and then gets to training a little bit. So Tanjiro gets a chance to kind of see what this kid's got, and Muichiro's got some moves. His sword breaks, and so he has to call it a day. Then we get Tanjiro doing a little bit of training himself with the mechanical doll. He gets beat up a heck of a lot. This is more the comedy stuff that I'm not really a huge fan of. But he spends a little while going up against the doll and eventually lands a hit on the doll, revealing a sword lodged in the doll's chest cavity that had been there for hundreds of years. So where episode 1 did a lot more work setting up the roadmap of where we're going to go this season, episode 2 was just more of a character focus bit. It looks like Muichiro's going to be more of the focus, and so they're giving him more screen time here, so that's what we get in this episode. We don't really get to know too much about him, other than he's just kind of this aloof, distant weirdo, and that he's definitely earned his Hashira status. He's definitely pretty strong. But it's here that we get into one of my kind of gripes with this series, in that we don't really get to know anything about Muichiro at this point. This would have been a decent opportunity to have him interact with Tanjiro in any kind of meaningful way. I don't know, you don't have to like get deep into the backstory, you know, on a first meeting or anything, but like there just wasn't a whole lot of anything there. And this happens a lot in this series, is Tanjiro just kind of like meets these people and then they like go into battle, and then we find out more about them. And I just wish that this show would take a little bit more time kind of building the world before we get to a fight. But what I'm coming to realize more and more is that with this show, the world doesn't really matter. It's all about the characters, and because of that, all these events kind of take place anywhere. Like, since the first season, we've had the Mugen Train arc, which was a movie first and then a shorter series. Then we jumped into Entertainment District arc, and now we're in Swordsmith Village arc. And it just feels almost like a fighting video game, where we've selected our characters, we've chosen our arena, and now we're gonna go into battle. And I just don't understand like why we can't build things up a little bit more in between. There's just no narrative connective tissue to this series. It's just like, here's the fight, now on to the next fight. So I don't know, I'm wanting a little bit more out of the narrative side of things, and I'm just not getting it. Now, a while back, I actually did write an article about Demon Slayer as seen through the lens of the Roland Barthes 1954 essay, The World of Wrestling, which, when you think about it, kind of makes a lot of sense. You know, a product like WWE, you've got, you know, very clear roles in the ring. You've got a good guy, a bad guy, your face and your heel. And the narrative takes place in the ring there. When you're watching a fight, you're watching all of the excess, all the, you know, the big moves go off, and that's what you're there for. You're not really there for any kind of extra narrative, although you might see like a promo cut here or there for an upcoming fight or whatever. But what you want to see is just that spectacle in the ring, and that's kind of what Demon Slayer does to a T. It's the way that the animation looks fantastic, and that it's such a clear-cut case of, you know, Tanjiro, the good guy, versus all these demons, the bad guys. So the stakes are very clear, and we're here for the spectacle of it. And as Barth says in his essay, wrestling partakes of the nature of the great solar spectacles, Greek drama and bullfights. In both, a light without shadow generates an emotion without reserve. And that's kind of what we see in every fight in Demon Slayer, is these like exaggerated, huge emotional moments in a fight. In doing so, give us what Barth says are the three tenets of any good spectacle: suffering, defeat, and justice. We see, you know, suffering when we see Tanjiro down for the count, bleeding, beat up, and the demon kind of like gloating over our hero. We as the audience have to feel that powerlessness. That's what we're looking for in that scene, is to see, you know, what we think might be Tanjiro's ultimate downfall. But we know this won't be the case. We know that Tanjiro has like bulletproof plot armor. And so we're just waiting for justice to prevail. And that's why Tanjiro is such a goody two-shoes. Like, he has to epitomize this purely moral concept of justice at all times. He has to be so good so that he can smite these demons. In the case of last season's arc, it looked like Yutaro, the upper demon number 6, I think he was, had the upper hand. Tanjiro was going down. It looked like he might have actually met his match. But because Yutaro is a classic villain in the wrestling sense, in the narrative sense, he gloats too much. His ego gets the best of him. And so the greater the contrast between the success of a move and the reversal of fortune, the nearer the good luck of a contestant to his downfall, the more satisfying the dramatic mime is felt to be. So with Tanjiro turning the tides when all seems lost, and with the, you know, visual flair that Ufotable is able to provide, it manages to create these spectacles of excess that are just what we're here to see. And at this point, you know, everyone involved in the production of this anime knows that that's what we're here for. There's plot, there's, you know, it's kind of there, but really it's these fights and it's this animation that we're just like drooling over. I feel like I got off on this tangent talking about how Muichiro, we didn't learn anything about him, and I wanted to know more about him. And I think what I just was talking about there is why we don't get to know more about him at this point, because what Demon Slayer does so well is it lays everything out in the ring, and that includes all of the emotional beats that we're supposed to feel for characters happens in a fight. And that's what's happened in the last couple of seasons, and I have to imagine that's what we're going to get here as well. So episode 3, we get a little bit more comedy off the start. The sword inside the mechanical doll is rusty and unusable, and here's where we finally get to meet Hage Nezuka, who is willing to take the sword, fix it up for Tanjiro, and gives Tanjiro a loaner sword for the time being. So Tanjiro returns to the swordsmith village, and it's just kind of like hanging out. He chats with Genya. Genya's this angry dude who I think we've met before, but can't really remember him. And then we get a hint of plot here with the two upper-ranked demons, Gyoko and Hantengu, slowly creeping towards the swordsmith village. We then get a little scene with Tanjiro and Muichiro Muichiro asking a couple of questions about Hagenezuka and how Tanjiro also knows Kanamori, who's another swordsmith in the village, and then kind of asks why Tanjiro feels so compelled to help people. So it's just some kind of like little banter between the two of them. Builds a little bit of character, but then the demons bust in, making their entrance into the ring, so to speak. And we get Muichiro springing into action with his technique of mist breathing. Pops a demon's head off right away, thinks, okay, we got this guy. But doing this only seems to cause the demon to kind of duplicate itself. So now we've got a couple of demons to take care of here, and unfortunately Muichiro gets blasted out of the arena, sent flying, and leaving just Tanjiro and Genya showing up to kind of provide some support. Genya's got this rad little sawed-off shotgun looking thing that blasts one of the demons and again splits it, causing it to duplicate again. And then Genya gets smoked, so that doesn't look very good for him. The episode ends with Muichiro saving Kotetsu, who's being attacked by a little smaller fish-looking demon thing. He was inspired by Tanjiro's desire to help people, and so thought to save Kotetsu when he was ready to just run right past him and leave him for dead, basically. So, good boy Tanjiro, spreading that positivity to everyone far and wide. So that's the first 3 episodes of this season of Demon Slayer, and as a first 3, it does what it's supposed to do. We set up the plot, who are the demons that are going to be sent out to take on Tanjiro this time around. Okay, we got that. Where is Tanjiro going? He's going to the Swordsmith's village. Okay, we've got that. Who are our supporting cast? We've got some new Hashira who we met way back in the first season, but now we're getting them in the spotlight. And the 3rd episode gives us the start of the battle that's probably going to take up the remainder of the time. So when it comes to following the first 3 formula, it gives you everything that you're looking for to at least make the decision whether or not you want to keep going or not. The teaser of more, spectacular action to come is a pretty big draw for this series. It's going to look pretty good. It's something that Ufotable prides themselves on, and their style is pretty unique. A fascinating blend of CG and traditional 2D animation. I don't think that there's anybody in the biz that does it quite as well as Ufotable does. From time to time, some of their 3D stuff doesn't look, top-notch all the time, but kind of like where it matters, when Muichiro lops off the demon's head at the end of episode 3, it looks really good. And it's those moments where the show really spends all of its budget. I mean, that's what we're here for, really, is we're here to see Tanjiro, emerge victorious again. We know he's not gonna die at this point in the series. That would be pretty wild if they did do something like that, but I don't think that's in the cards here. He's too good of a boy. They can't kill him off at this point. So that he's gonna win. We're just waiting to see how he's gonna do it. What new level of sword skill is he gonna hit that we're gonna be impressed by here? What's it gonna take to take down these 2 new foes? That's what we're here for. Now, I will admit that just to be here for the spectacle of it all is getting a little bit tiring. As I've kind of laid out, it's some of the things I don't really care for about this series. The comedy elements generally fall pretty flat. I don't mind it every now and then, but it seems like every single thing, it has to be kind of like jokey, and we get these kind of like, super deformed character models to, show off like, oh, it's a joke right now, and it's like, I don't really like that. And I wish there was just a little bit more narrative. You don't have to give me all of it, but the fact that we're at the end of episode 3 and we are full on in to the fight that's going to take up the rest of the time, and then I don't know anything about the Swordsmith Village, really. I don't really know anything about Muichiro. Mitsuri just took off, so the characters that we're supposed to like actually care about. How are we supposed to care about them when we know nothing about them at this point? Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that we are going to get, filled in on all of that as we go, which has kind of been what the show has been doing for a while now. But I don't know, like I just get a little bit tired of that. So, it's one of those shows that you can't not watch, really. If you've already kind of invested this much time in it, like, you're gonna keep going with it, so I'm probably gonna keep watching it, but I don't know. I might be hitting fast forward a bit more than I usually do. So the second series that we'll be covering today is Tengoku Daimakyo, Heavenly Delusion, coming to us from Production IG, one of the big name studios in the industry. And we've got first-time director Mori Hirotaka behind the camera here, so to speak. He's done some episode directing work with Haikyuu, and I think I saw Erased as well. But first time being kind of like the head honcho on a project, which is pretty exciting. The show is based on a manga by Ishiguro Masakazu, who did the maid-focused series Soremachi, which is a pretty cute series, but really couldn't be much more different from what Heavenly Delusion seems to be offering here. So what is this show all about? Let's get into it. In Japan, in the year 2024, an apocalyptic event known as the Calamity has occurred. We don't really know at this point in the story what the Calamity is. We're introduced to this world 15 years after the Calamity has occurred, so it's a post-apocalyptic situation. Lots of towns and cities have been reclaimed by nature, so whatever caused the Calamity did seem to wipe out a good chunk of the population. So our story begins in what looks to be some kind of school or academy. It does seem fairly futuristic. There are a fair amount of robotics. The teachers are robots. There are some pretty high-spec Roombas going around, cleaning things up. There's a kid that's got a motorized wheelchair that looks pretty high-tech. It's got this fairly clean sci-fi kind of look to it. All the kids just seem pretty normal. Boy whose name is Tokyo is taking a test when his little tablet device kind of glitches out and asks him the question, "Do you want to go outside?" And this sparks some curiosity in him, and we then quickly flash to the outside world. This is our first look at the kind of the post-apocalypse side of things. We got rusted out cars, buildings are dilapidated, it's overgrown with plant life. And as far as future wastelands go, this looks really nice. It looks absolutely gorgeous. The background work is really solid here. And here's where we meet our two, I think, leads at this point, based on what I've seen in the first 3 episodes here. Maru and Kiruko, boy and a girl, a couple of, teenage kids who are just kind of making their way in the world here. They're searching through a house that they kind of stumble upon that looks like it might still have some stuff in it. And as they're rooting around, they unfortunately come across a corpse. But while both are kind of saddened by this discovery, it looks like both of them have seen this before. It seems like a fairly common occurrence in this kind of bleak post-apocalyptic world. The cause of death, they believe, is starvation, which they say is what takes most people, because it seems like supply chains have just kind of run dry at this point, so kind of rough going for anyone who manages to survive in this world. And after we flip from the school setting to this post-apocalypse world, what immediately becomes apparent is that the budget is high for this project. Production IG is a well-respected studio in the anime industry, and it's no surprise they've been able to pull in a lot of talent at all levels to deliver something that looks really, really good. And we get our first real taste of kind of like what to expect with the animation here when Maru and Kiriko run afoul of a couple of survivors that look to take advantage of what they perceive to be a couple of under-equipped kids. But it doesn't take long for Maru and Kiriko to turn the tables on these guys. Kiriko pulls out a gun, which immediately kind of sends a threatening vibe. And Maru seems to be pretty well equipped when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. So these guys don't really stand a chance, and it only takes Kiriko firing one kind of warning shot with this gun that apparently blasts like a laser type beam. And these older, kind of grouchy survivors immediately kind of change their tune and agree to help out. And it's here that Maru and Kiriko ask these guys if they've heard of a place called Heaven before. And the guys are like, oh yeah, we might have heard something about that. And so they jot down some directions on the map that Kiriko's holding on to, and Maru and Kiriko are on their way again. So we flip back to the school setting again. Tokyo is talking with his classmate Mimi Hime, who's this kind of like sleepy-eyed girl with big bushy eyebrows. She's pretty cute. And they're both chatting about the outside. What's the outside all about? And Tokyo just can't get this idea out of his head, so he's wandering around the campus at night, and he runs into the director of the school. And when Tokyo asks the director about the outside, the director is pretty surprised, and at first is like not sure what to say, but then does decide to let Tokyo in on the I don't know, big secret, I guess, that there is in fact an outside beyond the walls of the school grounds. So we go back to Maru and Kiriko, and they're on their way to the tomato heaven that they've been told about by the scruffy survivors. But it's getting late, they're looking for a place to stop, and they find this house that appears to have signs of life. There's a woman running the place as an inn of sorts for weary travelers, and the kids are able to freshen up, and the woman seems, pretty nice. In any kind of situation like this, even someone who seems nice, you're always like, is she gonna do something? I'm thinking she might do something. And I don't know, just the vibes, the angles of cameras, and just the way that the whole house looks, it's a little bit creepy. Even though it kind of has some signs of being normal, I don't know, the vibes are just not good off the bat, and I think Kiriko kind of picked up on this pretty early on. So the woman that runs this house, she lets Maru and Kiriko know that there is a beast that's kind of lurking around the area. They should be very careful. But the kids almost like immediately are like, oh, are you talking about a man-eater? And the woman immediately starts to kind of like wig out about their knowledge of the man-eater. So another kind of like a red flag that things maybe aren't as they seem here. So episode 1 ends with the two kids falling asleep, but the woman that runs the place is doing all kinds of things. She's got a shotgun ready to roll, and just then a big demon thing kind of appears outside. It's this giant headless bird looking kind of thing. It appears at the window in the darkness, and that's our closing shot of the first episode there. So from the get-go, this show seems fairly ambitious in that we've got two main plot lines kind of running in parallel to each other here, and we're jumping back and forth between the two, the school setting and then the kind of outside the post-apocalypse world. It's a little disorienting at first because it doesn't seem like there's any major connective tissue between the two plot threads at this point. Like, are these two things happening at the same time? Are they somewhere close in geography? A lot of unknowns at this point, which I think, adds to the appeal, I would say, in that you don't really know what's going on between these two different worlds at this point. But one thing that we do know immediately is that this show looks amazing. The background work is like stellar. And that's because the art director here is Kaneko Yuji, who has worked on Ranking of Kings, which is amazing. Kill la Kill, which is a pretty big hit, and Sakasama no Patema, which is was a movie from a couple years ago. It's got another kind of like a weird post-apocalypse, but also kind of like bright and cheery kind of vibe as well. So, and he's also done background work for Shinkai Makoto. So it's no surprise that the show just looks amazing. And when you combine that with some wonderfully choreographed action scenes, what you get is just an excellent package all around. Production IG definitely has the clout to kind of like bring in people that they want specifically, and Mori, the director, wanted to have Takeuchi Tetsuya come in and do some work for them, and he's someone who's well known in the kind of storyboarding world of really creating some high-flying, energetic action scenes, and we see his work in the first fight with the kind of scruffy survivor guys, and that first action scene really kind of sets the tone for what to expect, and things kind of only get better from here. So yeah, nice first impression for sure. So the world, or worlds I guess, have been kind of set up in the first episode here. Episode 2 is kind of like hammering home some of the themes, I guess, and we go back to the school. Tokyo is still kind of wondering about what the outside world might mean. Now he's chatting with a classmate who's in a wheelchair and appears to be suffering from some kind of disease or infection. He's got this little like purple mark on his arm, and we don't really get a whole lot, but the camera does focus on that for a few seconds, and so we see what could be kind of brewing under the surface here. So we get introduced to a few more of the cast members here in the school setting, one of which is Cuckoo, this kind of like awkward girl who has just scored a drawing from Kona, the hot guy around the school. Kona had promised to draw something for Tokyo, but Cuckoo has stolen it, taken it, called dibs on it, and Tokyo's a little bit annoyed by this. Seems like he may or may not have a crush on Kona. It's a little hard to tell, but I think he's putting off the vibes. He kind of confronts Kona about why he decided to give Cuckoo the drawing that he had asked for. Kona's got some interesting art. It's kind of like this weird, like, guru kind of stuff. It's just a little bit odd. So there's that little scene to kind of start things off. Then we go back to Maru and Kiruko, so it feels like it's going to be flip-flopping between the two quite often here. So we are back at the house. It's night, and Kiruko has kind of come to in the middle of the night, and something's not right, and she wakes up Maru, and the two of them head outside to kind of investigate. They haven't seen the woman yet, but they do encounter the man-eater. It emerges out of the darkness. It looks pretty menacing. Maru and Kiruko seem like they are pretty confident that they can take it. They've got the gun ready to roll, and Maru's got his, fists up ready to fight the thing. It pulls off a couple of moves where he's got these whips kind of going, and so the kids are a little taken aback by that. Really action-heavy scene here, which is really great to see. It looked really impressive. Kids are dodging and diving out of the way of things. The man-eater is breaking through stuff. It's blowing stuff up. It's kind of pretty big and set piecey, and really, really good action scene here. Then they encounter the woman who begs Kiruko and Maru to stop fighting this man-eater because the beast itself is her son. Her son was eaten by the beast, it seems, and she claims that it now has his consciousness inside it. And for a moment, it seems like she's, right on about this, because the monster kind of like, chills out a little bit. But then something happens that is not so cool. And so Kiruko and Maru have to take care of the beast. and Maru gets up real close to the thing and kind of like reaches into it and crushes the thing's heart with his own hand. Not quite sure how he's doing this. Isn't really explained, but cool. He's got some pretty sweet jujitsu moves there, so right on there. And while like Maru seems to be freaking out a little bit more about how things go, you can tell that Kiriko has been through all this before. She's all business, and she's like, well, we just gotta move on. We're on our way to Tomato Heaven, or whatever this place is called. Like, okay, let's just keep rolling. And we get some more great background art. We come across a scene where it looks like a village is like flooded out or something. Like it's just become like a permanent lake, basically. And so the two of them have to make their way across on a little, ramshackle boat thing that they kind of make for themselves. And then we're back to the school again. Tokyo still talking about outside. Okay, we get it. One of his classmates tries to use the kind of fancy Roombas they've got rolling around the school to climb up a wall. The Roombas seem to attach to things and then do the little sweeping protocol or whatever. And so he tries to ride these Roombas up a wall, gets up pretty high, but then they kind of crap out and they send him tumbling down to the ground. He falls pretty far. And he also smacks the ground pretty damn hard as well. But he bounces up and seems just fine. So, we haven't really been given too much information about what these kids are all about. But, I don't know, you fall from like 20, 25 feet or something like that, and you can just pop right back up. That's a little bit strange. And that's it for that little scene. So we're just getting very small little pieces about this school situation before we kind of cut back to our main duo, who we're really trying to get the viewer endeared to, it seems. So they've made it to Tomato Heaven. It's a farm that seems to be run by some folks. They've kind of established their own little piece of paradise here in this horrible post-apocalyptic existence. And they've got a little community kind of built up. It seems pretty nice. It isn't the heaven that Maru is looking for, unfortunately. But what we do get is a little bit more story stuff here. Maru hands Kiriko a canister with a drug in it, apparently, and he's been told that somewhere in the world is someone who has the same face as him, which is our first real connection to the school, because Maru looks a lot like Tokyo. And that when he finds this person who has his face, Maru is supposed to inject the drug into the person. Why? We're not really sure. He thinks it's to do some good, like to save the person. So, but it's not really clear what this thing might do. Is he being lied to? We don't really know. And we get a little bit more about the kind of weird purple sickness on people's bodies that we're seeing. There's a little flashback to a woman named Mikura, who seems to have been someone important to Maru, and she had the sickness all over her body, and it looks like she was going to die, and so she's entrusted Kiriko to protect Maru for her. So, because this farm doesn't seem to be what they were looking for, in fact, Maru and Kiriko decide that they're going to head back to Tokyo, the city, and this farm, they have access to a boat, which will cross a river, lake, maybe the ocean, it's not really clear, some body of water, and take them back towards Tokyo. So they agree to hop on, and it's here that Maru confesses to Kiriko, but she refuses, saying something very interesting here. She says that she has the body of a woman, but in her head she's a man. So what could that be all about? So episode 2 was really a nice focus on our two lead characters. The chemistry between them is really great. There's lots of banter and the kind of squabbling that you would expect to hear between two teenagers. But yeah, I think it's a credit to the work of the voice actors here. We've got Kiriko being voiced by Sembongi Sayaka, who I'm not too familiar with. She does play Haru in Beastars, but she's really great as Kiriko here, and apparently she was a fan of the manga before the anime was even announced, and so getting to be a character in the series has been a big plus for her, which is awesome. That's really cool. And on Maru's side here, we've got Sato Gen, who between this and Insomniac's After School, I'm really getting a steady diet of Sato's voice here. He's a little bit more animated in this, I guess, but he's got the same kind of, I guess, flustered energy that Nakami has in Insomniac's After School. So yeah, some similarities between the two characters, but yeah, good work as well on that front. So episode 3 is mostly a flashback to 5 years ago in the Asakusa area of Tokyo, where Kiriko earns a living as kind of a race car driver, I guess, in a way. They've kind of made this little Mario Kart style league of racing through the empty streets of Tokyo, and Kiriko is able to earn some cash this way. She is living at a makeshift orphanage with her younger brother Haruki, and here we also get to meet Inazaki Robin, who is someone who Kiriko mentions very briefly in episode 1 as someone that she's looking for, and so now we get to see who this person actually is. So starting to connect some of the little plot pieces are kind of coming together here. So even in the cities here, the man-eaters are still kind of prevalent, and Robin and some of the older folks who kind of live in the neighborhood around the orphanage protect people, and they one night they're heading out to take care of a man-eater that's appeared, and Haruki decides to join them. He's trying to be a tough kid. He's trying to, protect his older sister, and so he has kind of fashioned this little crossbow thing that he uses to fight off the man-eaters, and apparently he, is pretty decent at it, although Robin kind of scolds him for, helping out when really he told the kids to stay home and stay safe. So one day while Kiriko is off racing, Haruki decides to go watch, and he notices that there's a man-eater very close to the kind of racing line, the track that they've set up for the day, and Haruki decides to confront the man-eater, fires a shot, doesn't do anything, decides to try and stab the thing in the face, but the beast then starts kind of consuming him, which is pretty horrific. And as the racers are kind of heading towards where the man-eater is, Kiriko notices this and stops the race. But as she does, she realizes that her younger brother is well into the jaw of this man-eater thing, and she tries frantically to pull him out. She does, but unfortunately there's not much left of the poor kid, just kind of this torso and a head, and he's not long for this world. And then it kind of quick cuts to a hospital, and Kiriko wakes up, and at least we think it's Kiriko, wakes up and starts kind of wandering around the hospital. Has got all kinds of bandages and looks in pretty rough shape, but comes across a mirror, and seeing the reflection that they do, immediately the first reaction is One-chan. So we realize that Haruki is actually still inside Kiriko in some capacity, which is pretty wild. So poor Haruki, his brain is still inside the body of Kiriko. It's a little unclear exactly what has been done to these two, but some kind of horrible body horror situation is going on, and Haruki really has a freak out moment, realizing that he's in the body of his sister. What happened to his sister? Wasn't she okay? Like, she pulled him out of the man-eater's grasp. So something that we don't really know too much about, but now our Haruki Kiriko hybrid kid is in search of Robin and the doctor who performed the operation on them, and that's kind of where we're at. Maru has been listening to this flashback patiently this whole time, and he's pretty shook by the whole thing, and a little bit bummed out, I guess, because he really had the hots for Kiriko, and now he's a little bit confused as to what all this means after finding all of this information out. Okay, so that is the first 3 episodes of Heavenly Delusion. There's a lot going on. It's a busy series, cutting between the 2 different plot threads that we're slowly kind of making connections to, but at this early stage it's hard to really see how much connective tissue there is at this point. But it's juggling the balance of the 2 pretty well. There was definitely more of a focus on Maru and Kiriko in these first 3 episodes. I think it really wanted you to get invested in their story first, and I think that it worked pretty well. I found that the characters really rubbed off on me pretty quickly, and when we kind of hit some more emotional notes in the 3rd episode here, I was already fairly invested in what was going on. So a good sign there that everything is kind of coming together. The music is another standout. It's again Kensuke Ushio, who is doing the music for Dangers in My Heart right now, whereas that is definitely more piano-driven stuff. It's more kind of like emotional, hitting the right moments of the scene. This soundtrack is a lot more ambient, and it's a lot more synth-based, but it still really like pumps up the action where it needs to. And when things do kind of hit some more emotional moments, we do bring in the piano again, and it's all in all really nice accompaniment to the visuals that we're getting as well. So the whole package kind of really is clear in setting the tone of what it wants to be, and when you've got like really quality people working on in all of the kind of key areas there, and a lot of the staff on board for this project have like worked together on previous projects, so all of that kind of stuff is factoring into making this like a really slick production. So yeah, in the first 3 episodes, it really presents a lot. There's a lot of plot to digest here, I think. The character work is really good. I find that the characters in the school are less developed at this point, but I feel like there's got to be some point where we switch over and start focusing on them a little bit more. But Maru and Kiriko are great. Feels like a real genuine relationship there. So, that work is really good. There's enough plot threads that have been like laid out already that you're curious to see where they might go, because it feels like they could go in any number of directions, and there's always, the overarching kind of like commentary that could factor in with any kind of like post-apocalypse setting. It's often used to be kind of like this canvas for, working out all kinds of, societal issues and whatnot. So I'm sure that as the series kind of goes on, we're going to dig into those thematic elements, but I think that the ambitious narrative structure is kind of preventing any of the thematic elements from really jumping out right away, and that's okay, because the narrative elements that are there, the kind of like split plot threads that we've got going on here, are interesting enough that they're kind of like keeping us entertained. And as time goes on through the series, I imagine that we're going to start to kind of hit those thematic beats a little bit harder. So that's going to do it for this episode of the First 3 podcast. and I think I'm actually ready to admit that Demon Slayer really is all style, no substance, mostly. Can't quite rule it all out yet. There could be something coming up, but I don't know. From what I've seen, just not really feeling it. I think the action looks great, the characters are okay, but yeah, it's just not doing it for me. On the other hand, Heavenly Delusion, what a surprise! What a great combination of strong, interesting narrative and excellent animation to back it up. Production IG is doing a great job on that show, and I hope that it continues to do so. It looks like a real winner. So that's gonna do it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Next week we will have a guest for the first time. So stay tuned for that next week, and thank you so much for tuning in.